Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Brown, and before we get started, I wanted to ask a thought-provoking question. And that question is simply this: what do you think? Why is cancer, diabetes, bacterial infections, and all sorts of other crazy diseases on the rise today with no seeming end in sight, and yet our medical world has gotten better? In other words, we're smarter, we're better, we understand diseases, and yet we're still getting sick. Why is that? Well, no doubt there's lots and lots of answers, from pollution to food to stress and all kinds of other things. But let me offer you a different point of view, my point of view. And it might be a different perspective for you. You see, in my point of view, our world is changing. In fact, it's already changed. It could better be said that it has already changed. And what do I mean by that? If you take a longer look at our planet, if you look back, like let's say back to the dinosaurs in the prehistoric age, the oxygen on the planet was almost 50% higher than it is now. 50% higher. In fact, it is a completely different environment, a completely different world. For example, I learned this just the other day. Did you know that insects grow as big as they have enough oxygen to grow? So back in the prehistoric days, they had centipedes that were 5 feet long and dragonflies that were the size of a hawk. That's amazing. In fact, I've been thinking about that. Wouldn't it be great to go to a zoo or someplace like that and see, wouldn't you love to see a butterfly that's that big around and ginormous ants? That would be fantastic. But you see, they lived in a different world. I don't even know if a human could live in that high of an oxygen environment. But that's the way our planet used to be. In fact, coal is a testament to exactly how our planet used to be. You see, coal is plant matter that's been crushed down from boggy swamps and things like that. And yet coal, to have a foot of coal in the ground where they would mine it, it took several feet, maybe 10, 20 feet of plant matter to be crushed down to that size. And yet the coal pits that they mine today to get coal out of the ground they're ginormous. They're beyond our comprehension. They're so deep. There's so much of it. And there is nowhere on the planet today that can grow vegetation in that mass quantity. And yet coal mines are all over the world. Here, take a look at this slide. This is a coal mine from India. Look at the size of it. Here's one from Wyoming. That one's tremendous as well. And look at this one. I don't know where it's from, but look at the size and the mass. You see how small those roads are compared to the size of the pit. So coal is a testament to how green and how lush our planet used to be. Oxygen levels were much, much higher at one point in time. I've read that the longest life expectancy is a greenhouse worker. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it makes sense. They spend their day in the greenhouse working with plants in the environment, in an oxygen-rich environment. It feeds your cells, it feeds your life, it keeps your immune system strong, and it only makes sense. Do you remember back in the tabloids a few years ago about Michael Jackson sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber? I don't know if that's true, but of course the man could afford any kind of anything he wanted. And oxygen is health. Oxygen is life. Period. End of story. For example, what happens when you go to the hospital? It depends on your condition, of course, but one of the first things they do is, of course, they give you oxygen. And by feeding you oxygen, they know that that's the basics. And the other thing is give you an intravenous drip of water. Water is oxygen. We're almost all dehydrated. And of course, oxygen going in your body. That is the basics of life. So here's the question. What is oxygen? How do you define it? What is it? Well, the easiest way to define is in a liquid, and it's called pH. So what is pH? Well, let's start with this very simple illustration. You see here a clear, pure glass of water. If that was distilled water with no minerals in it whatsoever, it would be a 7 pH. Well, what is pH? pH stands for parts hydrogen or percentage hydrogen. That's what that pH symbol means. And man has learned that it's easier to measure hydrogen in a liquid than to measure oxygen. So the pH meter is just simply measuring hydrogens in a given amount of fluid. So let's bring this to an illustration. Let's say you have that pure glass of water and you add something acidic to it, like some vinegar. Well, you add the vinegar and you check it again with your pH meter, it's going to read lower. Well, now what does that mean? It means three things. One is the water is more acidic, because vinegar is acidic, of course. It means there's more hydrogen in that water. and it means there's less oxygen compared to the hydrogen than there was just a second ago. Now if I lost you, let's do the other side. So for example, what if you added something alkaline to that water? This is why it's critical to understand this. If you add something alkaline like baking soda or salt to that water, and you use your pH meter, it means now the same three things, just the opposite way. It means that it's more alkaline, number one, so the pH meter will read higher. It's like 7, 8, 9. It means that there is more oxygen in that water now, and it also means that there's less hydrogen compared to the oxygen than there was a minute ago. I know it might sound a little bit confusing, but it's really not. Let me give you another quick, easy, simple example. Look at our goldfish here. If you took a goldfish and you put him in a bowl of distilled water, then the water would be a 7 pH. It would be totally neutral. But as he starts processing the oxygen through his gills to live, the goldfish is going to be using up the oxygens, and his water is going to become more acidic. It's going to become more acidic till eventually the goldfish has to go to the top to go get air. And why is that? Because he's used up all of the oxygen. Therefore, there's more hydrogens and the pH will drop, meaning that it's more acidic. I'll give you another example. How about this? You've heard of it, acid rain, right? Well, what is acid rain? Acid rain is the water that's in clouds is pure distilled water. There's no minerals in it whatsoever in its pure form. Now, of course, when those water droplets start coming to the earth, if there's dust and things in the air, it picks those up and that can change the composition of the water. Well, over cities that are very polluted, there's all kinds of hydrocarbons and garbage and just dirtiness in the air, and the water droplets pick those up on the way down, but all that pollution is very, very acid, or there's more hydrogen in those water droplets than there were before. And they can not only pit the paint on your car, but also when they flow to the creeks, they starve the fish of oxygen because there's more hydrogen, less oxygen. The fish can't breathe and they die. So that's what acid rain is. So hydrogen is a very, very critical, important measurement of, it is the basics of how much oxygen is in a given fluid. It's crucial to know that. So this is an oxygen molecule. Now you'll notice right here at the very top, there's these two marks, one here and one here. These are the two, they're called valences on a molecule. Now, I know you didn't expect a chemistry lesson, but this is critical for health, and we're going to get back to cancer, diabetes, and bacterial infections, but you got to understand why this is important. Oxygen is the building block for life, absolutely, for an aerobic creature as a human, or an animal, a mammal, whatever. This is it, and you need to understand how it works to be able to understand how to use it and manipulate it in your favor. So an oxygen molecule has what's called two valences. A valence is where on a molecule other molecules attach to it. So a water molecule has two. Okay, now they're marked with a plus because in chemistry, this is also important, it's kind of cool. In chemistry, whenever there's a free electron, literal electricity on a molecule, it's marked with a plus. And when it's missing one, it has a minus. So an oxygen has two free electrons and has two valences where things lock on. Hydrogens, at least in the liquid form, now somebody might try to bust me on this, but because in the form of air, hydrogen can have a positive electron, but in the case of water, of course, they bind on. So hydrogens are missing electrons. Hydrogens literally want to steal your energy. Oxygen wants to literally give you energy. It's as simple as that. So this is a water. This is a perfectly balanced thing. It's H, there's two, H2, and an O. H2O, it's water. We all know that. Okay. Well, what would acidic water look like? Like after that goldfish had breathed in the water for a while, it would look like this. In other words, it's still water, but there's an extra hydrogen floating around, and the pH meter would say, hey, this is more acidic. It's as simple as that. Well, what if we went tink, and then we go tink, and we take off another one? This would be massively alkaline water for two reasons. One is there's still a valence over here. This oxygen has a free electron, and in our water now, there's more oxygen compared to the hydrogen. So the pH meter would say it's alkaline, and really what that means is there's more oxygen. It's like liquid oxygen. It's fantastic. So this would be called water or hydroxide. Hydroxide is the technical term for this, or it's called HO. So it just means that it's missing a hydrogen. This is actually an unstable molecule. It's very, very hard to achieve. We'll get into that later. But the point is that this would be water, because there'd be other H2Os floating around, but this has the potential to not only give you massive amounts of energy, but also boost oxygen levels, literal oxygen levels in the blood. And so it would be alkaline water. That's why all the hubbub about alkalinity. Okay, let's talk about cancer for a second. What does cancer have to do with alkalinity, acidity, or oxygen? What is it? Well, what we've learned so far is that alkalinity equals oxygen. They are one and the same. It's the exact same thing. Acidity and lack of oxygen, or more hydrogen, whichever the way you want to look at it, is the same thing. In other words, if there's less oxygen, it's acidic, period. Well, what does that have to do with cancer? Well, everything. Absolutely everything. That's what it has to do with cancer. This man, his name is Otto Warburg. And in 1931, he won the Nobel Prize for doing some amazing research, especially for the time. Now it's very common. He laid the groundwork for it. What he did is he took normal human cells. Now, we live by an aerobic process. In other words, we process oxygen. We process this oxygen. So he took those cells, he put them in a petri dish, and he cut down the oxygen levels by about 30%. And what happened? Those cells had the ability to flip over and become what's called fermenting cells. In other words, they could live without oxygen. Every cell in your body has the ability to live without oxygen, but that's what we call fermenting cells or cancer cells. It's the exact same thing. So he won the Nobel Prize for doing that. He was the first man to discover it. And he was also, he added oxygen back to those cells after a while, and I don't know if it was a minute or an hour or how long it was. But when he added oxygen back to the cells in the petri dish, some of them could go back over and become aerobic again, but some of them couldn't. In other words, they continued to live by the process of fermentation. So oxygen has everything to do with cancer. Now, are there other ways the cancer starts? Well, certainly. And I'm not saying it's cut and dry, but the fact is, way back in 1931, they figured that out. Now, let's read the quote from two-time Nobel Prize winning Otto Warburg. He says, "Cancer, above all other diseases, has countless secondary causes, but even for cancer, there is only one prime cause. Summarized in a few words, the prime cause of cancer is the replacement of the respiration, in other words, using oxygen, of oxygen in the normal body cells by a fermentation of sugar." Otto Warburg. So he was basically saying, actually it wasn't basically saying, he was exactly saying that the lack of oxygen causes cancer. And cancer cells that are now fermenting cells ferment sugar. So in your daily life, in my daily life, oxygen means everything, absolutely everything. Can you alkalize enough to turn cancer around? That's a totally different subject, that's a totally different thing. And that's you'll find all kinds of reading about that, of course, about alkalizing. Once a person has cancer, that's all you're going to find on the internet is about alkalizing. And what that means is get those oxygen levels up. Truth is, before you get cancer, you should get the oxygen levels up. That's when you should be doing the good hard work. Now let's move on. Let's go to diabetes. I want to start out by saying I don't want to step on anybody's toes on the subject of diabetes, because there's a lot of controversy. Type 1, type 2, how the sugars are fermented and all these sort of things. I want to point out just one particular thing. I'd like to point out the fact that I've read many, many times, in a diabetic's, the way that they process fats, the way that their body burns fats, there's an extra hydrogen produced, and the result is lactic acid. Classically, I've read this many, many times, classically, people with diabetes have very, very high levels of lactic acid. Well, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to me? If you have chronically high levels of lactic acid, there's more hydrogen in a lactic acid molecule, and your body has the ability to get rid of lactic acid, but when it's produced on a constant basis, you can't get rid of it. And what happens is blood oxygen levels drop. For example, my wife's aunt, sadly she died of diabetes, And I remember the last years of her life having to wear leg braces. I've talked to many diabetics that have lost toes. And to me, at least the way I see things, you commonly hear it said that there's a lack of circulation in their feet. I don't believe that at all. I look at how tired a person is, and I look at their feet and their limbs. For example, if a diabetic has to lose a toe, why? Why is there less circulation? I don't think there's less circulation. I think there's no oxygen in the blood. Just like the goldfish breathing up the oxygen, our body uses the oxygen from our blood, but if you're constantly dumping hydrogens in, or acidity in the form of lactic acid, faster than your body can get rid of it, oxygen levels drop. You're incredibly tired. You can't hardly get out of bed. Your muscles are sore. You can't move. And with oxygen levels going down and down and down, our extremities, namely our toes, are the first ones to go. There's no oxygen. There's plenty of blood. It's flowing. There's nothing wrong there, but the fact is the blood can't carry oxygen. It's also called sepsis. So that's my opinion. I think that oxygen is absolutely key. And once again, to test the pH of lactic acid is not really a leap of anybody's imagination. It is acid. There's more hydrogen, there's less oxygen. Oxygen means everything to a diabetic. Now, let's move on to bacterial infections. Anybody who knows me knows that I could talk all day about bacterial infections, and I don't know why I'm obsessed with this particular thing, but the bacterial infections that really get a human being, it's interesting in a lot of ways to me. In the sense that bacterial infections, in my opinion, wouldn't happen if our oxygen levels on our planet were just a little bit higher. Our immune systems would be so strong, they would be so hot, that the chance of an infection would be almost nil, because our immune system would kill it just like that. In other words, one of the major reasons for an infection is because once that bacteria enters your blood, your immune system is unable to kill it. Therefore, it gets to live, and it takes over, and it starts doing what it's going to do. So bacterial infection, to me, to start out with, the main cause is lack of oxygen. That's the first thing. But then certainly, once a bacteria, be it Staphylococcus, be it Streptococcus, and there's quite a few others. I mean, there's hundreds of other bacteria that can get in our blood and wreak havoc on us. Those bacteria, a good number of them, well, for example, Staphylococcus and Streptococcus, they both are called LAB, or lactic acid bacteria. They produce lactic acid. Just like the diabetic I was talking about a minute ago, producing lactic acid in the human body, just continually, your body can't get rid of it fast enough. Oxygen levels go down, acid levels go up. Once again, measuring lactic acid is not, it is what it is, it's acid. And so therefore you can't carry oxygen anymore. I really, honestly, truly believe that if oxygen levels were higher, like I said, bacterial infections couldn't exist. Okay, that leads us to the question, what is phenomenal? Okay, let me tell you a really quick story. My father actually licensed phenomenal from another man. I'm not the original inventor of phenomenal. I'm the reinventor. I made it taste better. I made a lot of improvements, but I'm not the original inventor. So when my dad licensed it from this man, he paid a tremendous amount of money to license it, more of a trade really, and then he knew that it was the basis of health. My father understands the human body better than anybody I've ever met in my entire life. It's amazing what the man knows, and he knew that getting rid of acid is the same as boosting oxygen. That is the basis of health. He knew that. So this product, even though it didn't taste good and was kind of weird and just wasn't even attractive, he knew that it had to be one of the most unbelievable things for the human body ever. So he went ahead and licensed it. Well, like I say, when I say it didn't taste good when we first got it, to quote my dad, he said it's about like licking a dead carp that had been laying on the road for about 3 days. I mean, it was bad. It tasted horrible. So, like I say, be happy, because today phenomenal tastes fine. In fact, you can't even taste it if it's mixed properly. When he brought it home, he had this new thing. We didn't know how much of it to drink. We didn't know what it would do. We didn't know anything. So here's this new thing. And I clearly remember the day. I was drinking phenomenal and I was feeling better. I was feeling a lot better. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to see how much of this I can drink. I want to see what it'll do. So I decided to drink an entire gallon of mixed phenomenal in a day, or just pound it down and see what happens. So I don't know if you've ever tried to drink a gallon of water, but it's kind of hard to do. The first liter goes down easy, the second one's okay. Well, you start pounding that third liter down and it doesn't want to go. And about the time I got done with that third liter, I still remember the morning vividly. It was a kind of a dreary morning. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm getting done with that third liter and my energy was just exploding. And I thought, I want to go to the gym. That's what I want to do. Let's go. So I threw on my shorts, got in the car, went ripping down the road. The gym was about 12 minutes away, got there, went running upstairs to the treadmills. And now I'm no super athlete. I can get on a treadmill and run for maybe half a mile before I got to slow down. I still remember vividly, I ran for 2.5 miles straight. Sweat flying. I was about 7.5, 8 miles an hour, just booking it, loving the energy. I went downstairs, literally ran to the car, drove all the way back home, and I thought, I'm not done yet. I'm going to run around the block. And it's the only time I ever did in that neighborhood. We lived in Lincoln, California. I ran around our little suburban neighborhood twice. And when I got home, I was wrecked. I was so tired because I burnt myself out. I'm not used to spending that kind of energy. So I was so tired. But the fact is that Phenomenal gave me this massive, massive boost of energy. Now, on the flip side, my wife, who always has fine energy and she has no problem in the world, when she drinks it, she says, well, I think I feel something, but I'm not really sure. In other words, there's no ginormous boost. And the reason why is because we're all different. Some people are naturally acidic and some people are more naturally alkaline. I don't think that anybody's really naturally acidic. I think things push us to be acidic and the body can't compensate. But I've always been one of those people. Always sore, always tired, but I'm not anymore because I've learned how to balance that one thing. For me, it was miraculous. So why? What happened to me? Why that boost of energy? I'm going to explain to you. 2 reasons. One is, first off, an oxygen boost in the body gives energy. Oxygen is energy. That's all there is to it. The other thing is that, remember I explained this oxygen molecule a second ago? This valence here that's not filled, there's literally a free electron waiting to be given away. So you can look at this one of 2 ways. Either it's giving you an electron, or it's snatching up another hydrogen, becoming a water, but that hydrogen is missing an electron. In other words, it's literally trying to take electrons from you. So you can look at it either way. The fact is that how Phenomenal works, it's called hydroxide or stable hydroxide. And what we did was we figured out how to get rid of that hydrogen and then seal it in a bottle. When you mix it with water, there's these guys floating around. Of course, there's countless trillions of normal water molecules too, but there's a lack of hydrogen. I guess you could call it dehydrogenated water. We've taken the hydrogen out and it's stable, which is nobody's ever done that before. So what it does is it binds, it goes into your body and it literally finds a free hydrogen or acidity and it binds it. Now here's the cool part, because there's no toxic residue, because it binds it, boom, becomes water again, and it's water. And you get rid of it the way you normally get rid of water. It's beautiful. So you literally gain free electrons, which is just the coolest thing ever. Now, I gotta answer this question. The question is, does Phenomenal water cure cancer, diabetes, or bacterial infections? No. Not even claiming that, not saying that. I brought those up as illustrations, because the truth is, oxygen means everything to those conditions. Phenomenal, if you put a pH meter in it, is crazy, crazy alkaline. It is so alkaline that it's just amazing. It's like a 12.2 or a 12.5 in its concentrated form, and what you drink is an around 11 pH, and yet it's stable. Please don't confuse this with an alkaline water machine. That's a totally different video. That's a completely different animal. The fact is that you're drinking massive amounts of hydroxide, and so is Phenomenal water the most alkaline product on the market? Yeah, completely, by far. It absolutely is. There's not even a close competitor, and I feel blessed to have spent all these years without even a close competitor. How did we do it? Well, it's a trade secret, of course, but the fact is that we've created something so massively alkaline, and yet it's non-caustic. It can't hurt you. There's nothing there to do anything. It's just simply looking for hydrogen. So that's it. Phenomenal water is stable hydroxide, or it's water looking for hydrogen. In other words, it wants to bind this guy, turn back into water, and you get rid of it. That's all there is to it. So anyway, thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed hearing my ramblings. Maybe you learned something. I sure enjoy talking. Enjoy your phenomenal water, and once again, thanks for watching.